Welcome back, this is Wire93 and today we are looking at stories from our /MaliciousCompliance. Hope you enjoy, and if you do, don't forget to like and subscribe because at 1,500 subs I will be starting monthly giveaways. Now let's get into the stories. Our first story was posted by you/someone you don't know 70. Demand fast results, and they'll deliver. My mom, for lack of a better term, is a mega Karen. She frequently criticizes me for not being proactive enough and for not standing up for myself. The following story is one that she reminds me of to reiterate her point, but unbeknownst to her, it has the exact opposite effect. The scene was in the early 90s, and I was in college living with my pothead of a sister. At the time, my parents were covering our rent and giving us each a $250 monthly allowance for utilities and food. The only stipulation was that I had to effectively spy on my sister and make sure that she refrained from alcohol and drug use. You may ask why they couldn't trust a grown woman to manage her own life. The reason was that while I was in the military, my sister had gotten plastered and handed her car keys to a fellow partier, who then totaled her car. When my service was done, I agreed to move in with my sister, thinking that she would have learned prudence the hard way and that my only role would be to reassure my mom that everything was going okay so that my sister would be freed from her constant and overbearing harassment. Sadly, this was not to be. My sister had not mellowed out in the least. If anything, she evolved into a wake and baker. She blew her entire monthly allowance on drugs and alcohol. Her shenanigans included buying a QP bag with her friend with the intent of selling most of it, only to smoke it all. She also laundered money by convincing her friends to refill their gas tanks on her credit card in exchange for cash. The best part? My parents bailed her out when her card was maxed because she staged a robbery, and claimed that her debit card had been stolen and her bank account cleaned out. That summer, my parents took the family on a Mediterranean cruise, and my mom found a bag of weed in her luggage on the ship. This really caused my parents to flip out because drug offenses in Istanbul are no joke, and it's not far-fetched to think that our entire family could have been implicated in her nonsense. The following school year, in addition to having to live with me, my sister was also required to undergo surprise drug tests. One spring break, she went off to Las Vegas for the weekend with her friend, and when they got back, my mom sprang a drug test on her. My sister was flipping out because she knew for a fact that she was going to fail. She told me that she had been completely baked the entire time she was in Vegas. So there I was, preparing to falsely deny any knowledge of wrongdoing on my sister's part, when my mother called in a fury, but not for reasons that one might think. Apparently the lab had suffered an equipment failure, and they told her that they wouldn't be able to test the sample for a week. This was absolutely not acceptable to my mom, so she ranted and raved in her usual manner until they agreed to have the results back to her ASAP. The next day she smugly called me back to inform me that the results had come back negative. This wasn't a huge surprise to me. After all, if you test a positive sample on broken equipment, of course you'll get a negative result. That's how my sister got a temporary reprieve from her impending eviction. Every once in a while my mom still holds this event up as proof that demanding people get results. Unbeknownst to her, it's just a reminder to me that if I act like a Karen I should expect to be cheated. The next story comes from you/Renticle. Pay for 20 hours of work, get 20 hours of work. This happened last year and I've been waiting months to share the inevitable fallout. So please enjoy this lengthy tale of corporate stupidity. I'll begin by saying I work for a software company. I was working on a project for a client, to customize part of the software and stuff. The project was very open-ended, mostly because the client kept changing their mind about what they wanted, so the contract was time and materials, meaning that I had an hourly rate. I would log all the time worked on the project, in half-hour intervals, and every week my company would bill the client company for the hours spent on the project. The client said they didn't care how much effort it took, they wanted a good product and they wanted it before the end of the year, so they could present it at their big internal meeting. At the beginning, the project went great. Every week I had a meeting with the client, and I would get feedback on the progress, as well as new requests they might have, and then I'd spend however long it took to implement the changes. I'd bill them 15 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours, or however many it had been. Slowly, over time, the clients started requesting more and more. I told them during the meeting, this feature will require X days of work. Changing that will require Y more days. And so on, but again the client insisted they needed all those extra features. They also complained that the project wasn't advancing quickly enough, and insisted they needed the project completed before the end of the year. I talked to my manager and explained the situation. To be able to finish quickly enough, I needed to work full-time on this project. My manager moved my other projects to different people, and we told the client that until the end of the year I would work full-time on the project to ensure we will hit all the deadlines. The client was overjoyed, for about a month. The following month, the client is pissed and is demanding to know why we're charging them so much. I pull out my timesheets and explain that, as agreed, I'd been working full-time, and more, on their project. Every week I've logged between 45 and 50 hours of work, and I have detailed notes specifying exactly how I've spent that time. I'm not particularly concerned about being accused of stealing time, because I'm a fast worker and most tasks have been completed more quickly than the original estimates. Besides, I point out that I'm now working twice as many hours as before, so it's costing the client twice as much per week, but I'm also completing tasks twice as quickly and will be finished in half the time. The client, unfortunately, doesn't appreciate my use of logical reasoning. They accuse my company of taking advantage, and they say that starting from next week they no longer want to pay for more than 20 hours of work per week. I tell them, sure, we can do that, but it's October already and you want the project completed by the end of the year. Given the amount of work still left to do, I will need more hours to finish. The client doesn't let me explain and says that we're not to bill them for anything more than 20 hours per week. They will not pay us for more than 20 hours per week, and they want this in writing or they'll cancel the entire project. And my manager says, of course, the customer is always right. This was an evil act of malicious compliance, so please read until the end before getting angry at my manager, he's a great guy. So my manager sends the client an email confirming that, starting from date, my engagement with them will be capped at a maximum of 20 hours per week. He also attaches a spreadsheet of the estimated time to develop all the new features of the project, how many hours I'd spent so far, and how many hours I projected to spend to complete it. The client smugly acknowledges this. Before the end of the week, my manager gives me back my other project, as well as a new one. You see, at the time we were understaffed because we were growing too quickly, and we were getting more requests for new projects that we could handle. So there would have been no point in stealing hours from this client and pissing them off, when we can take on a couple of new clients instead and bill everyone for the actual work, and keep everyone happy. So, starting from next week, my new schedule is 20 hours with pissy client, 10 hours with client B and 15 hours with client C. It works great for me. It doesn't work that great for pissy client. At our next weekly meeting, one of the features they requested isn't ready yet. At the following meeting, I tell them we'll need to move the deadline for the next milestone by 2 weeks. Then it's the beginning of December, and they ask me if I would be able to make some last-minute changes and still deliver the project by the end of the year. And I say, oh, there is no way the project can be finished by the end of the year. We have yet another meeting with the client and my manager. My manager asks me why I'm missing this huge deadline. I say, do you remember when I was talking about all the work that still needed to be done and how long it would take? In October we estimated the project needed another 60 days of work. I worked 10 days in October and 10 days in November, because you said 20 hours max per week. It's going to take about 40 more days of work to finish the project. It's December. Even if I work overtime, there are not 40 days left before the end of the year. Manager is like, yep, makes perfect sense. Client does the shocked Pikachu face. They act like this is the first they've heard about not being able to meet the deadlines, even though I've been telling them for weeks. Unfortunately, they are the kind of person who never listens to what they don't want to hear. At first, they wanted the work done quickly, so they didn't think that if I worked more hours I would bill them for more hours. Then they wanted to be billed for fewer hours, so they didn't consider that I would work fewer hours on the project and things would get done much more slowly. Unfortunately for the client, who would like to pretend that we were springing this on them at the last minute, we had tons of emails to show we had told them well in advance. My manager's email back in October had even included an estimate of when the project would be completed based on number of hours worked per week. Our ass was well and truly covered. Now, as for the fallback. The client kicked and screamed and demanded that I go back to work on their project full-time, or even that my company should provide a second person to help me meet the deadline at the end of the year. It's January and the project is still unfinished, so you can guess how well that went. Client had to move the big presentation of the new software and was not happy about it, and about having to explain it all to their own CEO, but we told them very nicely in corporate tones to pound sand. I was already scheduled to work on 2 other projects for the next few months, and it had been hard enough to put me full-time on this project the first time. My manager is not going to leave another 2 clients hanging, especially not to please this pissy client who keeps changing their mind and threatens to cancel their contract every other week. As a company, we do our best to keep the client happy, but there is a limit to everything, especially when someone goes out of their way to not listen when we try to explain how cause and effect works. TLDR, client demands I work more slowly. I work more slowly. The work is not completed by the time client needed it, and client is upset, but I don't care because I get paid anyway. The last story comes from you/normal_plantain_123. Work from home means paid time off, guess we're off then. We have a hybrid policy, 2 days on site, 3 days work from home. We can pick the day we work from office, this changes every month. Most of us are on salary, so work can go on until late night, or end after an hour. On days that I have a heavy workload, I prefer to work from home and go to office on another day. One day all members from my team, 3 of us, decided to work from home, heavy workload. Only time this has happened since the office opened a year ago. The manager got pissed off. She sent a patronizing email. In her mail to us she said that she would count this as us not working that day. Decided to ignore her until we got an email from upper management parroting my manager's words. Turns out most people have a heavy workload and whole teams with their managers are working from home. My manager wouldn't know since she delegates her work. Anyways, she escalated the matter and upper management decided to agree with her. My team had a meeting and decided if we're losing our paid time off, we're using our paid time off. We sent an email to our manager stating the same, including a list of things she needs to do since we're off. We spoke to other teams who did the same with the upper management. We logged off and switched off our work phone. Manager had to do the work for the day herself. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed. Once this channel reaches 1,500 subscribers I will be starting giveaways, so don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Wire93 and I hope you have a great day, you beautiful people.